Deep underground in an undisclosed location, Tread Comics presents G.I. Joe, a real American hero. G.I. Joe, a real American hero, also known as Action Force in the UK, is a half-hour American animated television series created by Ron Friedman. Based on the toy line from Hasbro, the cartoon ran in syndication from 1983 to 1986. When Hasbro launched G.I. Joe, a real American hero toy line in 1982 alongside the Marvel Comics series, it commissioned Marvel Productions to produce a series of fully animated 30-second television commercials, which were broadcast in order to promote the toys in the comics, beginning with an ad for the first issue that aired throughout the spring of 1982. The popularity of these commercials led to the production of a 5-part G.I. Joe miniseries, which aired in 1983, later known as the M.A.S.S device, when it re-aired during the series syndication. The plot centers on the M.A.S.S device, a powerful matter transporter, and G.I. Joe and Cobra race around the world to acquire 3 catalytic elements which power the machine. A second 5-part miniseries followed in 1984, The Revenge of Cobra, with a similar plot that involved the Joes and Cobra traveling around the world to discover the shattered fragments of Cobra's new weather-controlling weapon, the Weather Dominator. Both miniseries were written by Ron Friedman. G.I. Joe was promoted to a full series in 1985, with an initial order for the first season of 55 more episodes, in order to make up for the required 65 episodes for syndication. This season began with a third Friedman-penned 5-part adventure, The Pyramid of Darkness. The story sees most of the existing cast from the 2 previous miniseries held captive by Cobra, while a new assortment of characters, that is, the new 1985 range of toys, thwart Cobra's attempt to surround the Earth with electricity-negating Pyramid of Darkness. Both the new and old characters then shared the spotlight throughout the course of the remaining 50 episodes of the series, which were primarily standalone, single episodes adventures with the occasional 2-part story. A second season of 30 episodes followed in 1986, beginning with a 4th 5-part story, Arise, Serpentor, Arise, in which Cobra scientist Dr. Mindbender, inspired by a dream, uses the DNA of history's most ruthless conquerors and rulers to genetically engineer Serpentor, who upserves Cobra Commander's leadership of Cobra. This miniseries introduced the new 1986 range of toys into the story, which were at the center of most of the stories across the rest of the season. In particular, the miniseries debuted former WWF and then current AWA professional wrestler Sergeant Slaughter as a member of G.I. Joe, played by himself. G.I. Joe the movie, a feature-length film version of the series, was intended to be released theatrically following the release of Transformers the movie. However, the movie encountered unexpected production delays, which allowed the Transformers feature film to be released first. Due to the poor box office performance of Transformers and My Little Pony films, G.I. Joe was regulated to direct-to-video status. The release on VHS on April 20th, 1987, and was later split into a 5-part miniseries for television syndication. The movie follows up on the events of Season 2, revealing that Cobra Commander is actually an agent of a secret civilization known as Cobra La, led by a half-serpent being named Galabulus. The same organization is also revealed to have had a hand in the creation of Serpentor, because the dream that inspired Dr. Mindbender to create him was actually a subconscious suggestion that was implanted into his brain by one of Galabulus's bugs. In addition to Cobra Law, 2 new sub-teams were introduced within the Joe team, the Rawhides and the Renegades, both of which were composed of characters that were introduced into the toy line during its 1987 lineup. Marvel Productions continued to produce the animated commercials for the toy line and comic books, which featured a new theme song with lyrics, "Nobody Beats G.I. Joe," after the broadcast of G.I. Joe the movie, which was intended to set up Season 3. However, the company never got around to producing a 3rd season, because it ended up losing its license due to the competing animation company DIC during pre-production. Michael Charles Hill, who wrote several episodes of the show, had already proposed an outline for Season 3 that would have followed the events of G.I. Joe the movie. In this unmade 3rd season, a criminal organization named The Coil, which is composed of a group of former Cobra elites who were led by Tomax and Zaymot, would have served as a new enemy faction, while mutated Cobra Commander would have tried to secretly rebuild his organization after the destruction of Cobra Law, shifting allegiance between the Coil and the Joes in order to further his ambitions. G.I. Joe was a co-production between Marvel Productions and Sunbow Productions. Sunbow's staff would write the scripts based on the characters and vehicle designs provided by Hasbro, while the artists at Marvel Productions would draw storyboards based on the scripts and record voiceovers. The animation was outsourced to Toei in Japan, who worked on all 95 episodes, as well as G.I. Joe the movie. The G.I. Joe comics and animated series share a few common plot elements that were not products of the toy lines, such as the town of Springfield, the October Guard, and the character of the Baroness, who was only introduced into the toy line in 1984. However, they did not share the same continuity, and as of a result, they differed significantly in terms of how the characters were written and the directions the stories took, particularly regarding the nature of Cobra Commander's true identity. In contrast to the comics, in which non-toy line characters such as G.I. Joe Commanding Officer General Flag and Cobra Scientist Dr. Venom were killed off early during its run, the TV series had to adhere to child programming regulations, and as a result, none of the characters were allowed to use actual firearms, and nobody was ever killed on screen. Instead, characters used laser guns to fight their battles, which were color-coded for each side, red for the Joes and blue for Cobra. Whenever a vehicle was destroyed on screen, the pilot or driver would often be shown exiting from it or parachuting before the destruction. However, the show was still allowed to make reference to off-screen casualties, as the term could be used interchangeably for injuries or death. One particular episode in Season 1, a 2-parter entitled Worlds Without End, in which the Joes are transported to an alternate universe where the Joes have been defeated by Cobra, feature a scene in which 3 members of the Joe team, Steeler, Grunt, and Clutch, find the skeletal remains of their counterparts from that world. The second part of the episode ends with the aforementioned characters deciding to remain in the alternate universe and replace their deceased counterparts. A public safety lesson was usually featured at the end of each episode, using G.I. Joe characters in brief scenarios to impart safety tips to children. These lessons gave birth to the catchphrase, "And knowing is half the battle." In each episode's opening title sequence, voice actor Jackson Beck stated that G.I. Joe is the code name for America's daring, highly trained Special Mission Force. Its purpose, to defend human freedoms against Cobra, a ruthless terrorist organization determined to rule the world. Because the series was produced as a vehicle to sell the toys, most of the episodes would focus on the newest characters being sold in stores at the time, while older characters would fall by the wayside as they were being phased out from the toy line. Most notably, Hawk, who was part of the 1982 launch lineup and the original G.I. Joe leader in the Marvel Comics, was absent during the entirety of Season 1 in favor of having Duke, a character introduced in 1983, the year when the first miniseries aired, to serve as the leader instead. When Hawk was reintroduced into the toy line with a new action figure in 1986, the character was suddenly part of the team in Season 2 as Duke's superior and the head of G.I. Joe's chain of command, with no explanation for his absence in prior seasons.